Hello, everyone. I am coming on today to share a piece that I wrote called Thy Enemy as Pathway to Soul, which I think will be really helpful for everyone. But first, I want to share a little bit on the main categories of the ways in which we can communicate online. I don't go into all the subcategories, but I go just into the general categories to give people a broader perspective. The goal is just to allow people to gain like a bigger picture on all these different types of communications and why the one-way broadcasting system often doesn't do justice to human to human contact communication. I mean, that sounds obvious, but we're going to clarify a little bit the different types. I'm just going to provide information, and so I'm going to share my screen. Okay, let's see if it's going to allow me. Okay. So we have, excuse me, I just woke up. Okay, so we have different types of ways in which we can communicate. We have, which is something that's always interested me, is the meta conversation, which is a discussion about the conversation itself. So the way in which the conversation is taking place, rather than the topic at hand. So any two people could be discussing a topic, but it's the ways, the type of communication they're using to discuss it will then be discussed in like another video or between two people. So it's a conversation about the conversation. Right. And that helps to increase awareness, right, on communication style itself and what sort of approaches we're taking to discuss certain topics. You have the public discourse, which are discussions that influence societal views, politics, or social movements. And these trends feature community participation where claims are shared, amplified, or debated. So public discourse is, you have all these different communities and they're all discussing related topics to their community views. And they're going to share, their findings and their beliefs on any said given topic, to help the progress, right, of that community's or that group's knowledge about a topic. So we have this, at large with mass media, but then we have all these subgroups that are conversing on very specific topics. And so someone will put out a video, bringing forth information, knowledge, their views on it, and then another person will bring forth, either in a debating style, they disagree or they agree and they amplify the message. And so you have, public discourse. Authentic content, or, producing views based on authentic experience. So it's more in the subjective realm, and people are sharing authentically what they've experienced, rather than bringing forth knowledge and information on any said given topic. Then you have content produced to generate money, right? Or sell a service and product. So the intention behind whatever information is being brought forth, is to produce like a kind of trend. Content produced is trend-based focus, often using sensationalism to keep the viewer hooked into, it could be a true narrative, but a true or false narrative, aiding with the sales of, any given product, right, or service. Then you have propaganda itself, refer to the Project Mockingbird, if you want to really dive into that. And it's content produced to sway the audience's view on political or public discourse towards specific conclusions that are not founded in truth, right? So it's a covert kind of approach to swaying the public's opinion. Then you have memes, which are small packets, small pieces of cultural information that get amplified. They can easily be captured, and often through humor and satire, and they direct the focus of that specific piece of information with the goal of spreading its message rapidly and efficiently throughout society. Because it's a small packet of information and often conveyed with humor, it can easily be shared. It's not an essay, it's not a long video. It's just a short piece of information that gets the point across to the most amount of people in the fastest way possible. And when there's humor involved, it often bypasses these barriers we have in the mind and go, directly into the subconscious mind. But that's another thing. So, due to the viewer's subjective nature, this is something I wanted to touch upon because I do have people that know me personally that watch my videos. And I recommend you have to have a really open mind, because if I'm addressing topics in one community that viewers or people around me have no idea about those topics or that community belief system, it's going to be very confusing. So that's part of the confusion with, the one-way broadcasting system, and also some of the challenges that arise when you do produce content and then you have people close to you watching that content. They'll cherry pick little pieces of information that relate to them. And often, if they're in your immediate environment or close to you, they think you're specifically speaking to them. You might have even had a conversation on a similar topic, so they feel, you're addressing that conversation in a wider, with a wider audience, but still relating to them. So I always recommend, if you're close to someone producing content, don't even watch their content. Just speak with them directly if you're in their inner circle. And that really alleviates a lot of confusion, because often, and I've written a huge essay on this a long time ago that addressed, the confusion that arises when you have someone on a podium in the one-way broadcasting system that receives a lot of people or clients, into their realm that they communicate with. And the confusion that arises when, they address specific topics that really, relate to one or the other in a general way. It's going to be taken by each person very differently, right? So even as content producers, we tend to cherry pick which information we're bringing forward that for one person might answer their question, but then for another, it completely sidetracks them, and doesn't relate to the question that they have, but they believe it is, and it does. So there's a lot of confusion on that layer of the internet, and this causes a lot of conflict. So what I wrote was, due to the viewer's subjective nature, content that is produced by people they know personally will generate more salience between the viewer and the creator, in which they tend to reflect upon what is being shared as potentially relating to lived personal experiences with that person. In general, people subjectively look for ways in which the content they are viewing relates to them personally, even when they have no experience with the topic, which is another issue. Example, people listening to stories told by any of the above, told by any of the above types of content creators will seek to find personal association to what is being shared and how it may relate to their personal lives and ideas. So we can see this, for example, with the concept of the Black Mirror and going onto the internet, people listening to, or just even reading titles, and it being a red thread that they follow as a conversation that the universe is having directly with them. Um, but there's a lot of different factors involved when it comes to the internet. We're dealing with algorithms, and we're also dealing with our perception of the information that we are gathering. And if we think that it's speaking directly to us, from this very esoteric lens, uh, people can often get lost in the virtual world, right? No longer relating to the natural world as the true mirror, right, for personal development. But that's just a little tangent. In a more general and broader perspective, people look for salience, right? So they hear something that they can personally relate to, and then they accept all the information that's being shared around that one thing as truth. So we really have to be careful in terms of, distinguishing between the information that it's like it's observe, don't absorb, as one of my friends likes to say, which is, it's the idea of, holding an idea and contemplating an idea without accepting it as truth, right? So we really have to be in the world that we live in nowadays. We really have to be keen observers and also have a lot of sovereignty when it comes to what we are allowing in and accepting in as truth, right? We got to do our own research. We got to follow our own path in terms of our own logic, reason, and intuition. So I wanted to bring this forward because some of the topics that I share on might get misconstrued, um, especially if they're read into literally. I'm often speaking metaphorically. And yes, I do bring in literal elements, but be very weary and very careful. And if you're in my inner circle, then I expect you, if you hear something that I say online, just come to me directly and ask me, for clarification, because I don't speak to anyone directly through my online content. If I want to say something to someone personally, I will say it to them personally. And that is, to me, the best way of communicating. The content that I bring online is part of my creative process, and it allows me to alchemize energy and alchemize different belief systems, alchemize thoughts, all sorts of things, so that I could move forward in my personal development. So I'm going to now share on Thy Enemy as Pathway to Soul. And I guess I'll just keep the screen. Should I keep the screen like this? No, I'm going to change it. I'll give you guys this view. So the information that I'm bringing forward is just wisdom I've gathered over the years, in terms of, I've dealt a lot with online communities and with communities in my vicinity. I have a stellium in the 11th house. And so if you use a system like Gene's Keys, for example, I'm here mastering culture. So I've moved through a lot of different communities, and I've reflected a lot. I've had a lot of information to, to kind of analyze in terms of my own experience to bring forth what I'm going to bring forth today. So let me just take a sip of water and I'll start. Okay. So the importance of enemies in personal development is quite understated. With age, we gain wisdom and we gain access to eternal truths. Wisdom in this context is what we gain when we finally accept eternal truths. And that eternal truth is that enemies will always exist throughout life as a necessary ingredient to personal growth. In order to gain this type of insight, our views need to move from the finite to the infinite realm of understanding. In any social dynamic or community setting, you'll find yourself surrounded by those whom you resonate with, but you'll also encounter those whom are hostile towards you, right? From a holistic perspective, these two types of encounters are two sides of the same coin. The coin metaphorically representing the light and dark aspects of our human condition. To an extreme, we can describe them as love and hate, right? Or veneration and envy, understanding and ignorance, collaboration and competition, clarity and illusion, two sides of the human experience of the same coin governed by the principle of duality. So these opposing forces exist in order to provide us with necessary opportunities for growth. They provide choice points, allowing us to harness free will, which in turn allow us to move from victimhood into an empowered state. Existing on this planet means experiencing both sides at one point or another. Through the hundreds of thousands of interactions we have, during our lifetimes, encountering both sides is what has allowed us to continue evolving and finding within what can only be described as a state of inner balance, wholeness, or even enlightenment. Enemies help us sharpen our skills and expand beyond fear, while love and being loved gives us both courage and strength, as Lao Tzu puts it. I love that quote. I've been studying social dynamics within groups and online communities for at least the last 15 years, but really this goes back, I'm getting old now, this goes back a long time. And what I can share with you through these experiences, and after a lot of reflection, might help you expand your awareness of the human condition, which most people already know. We already have this knowledge. We are often just reminding each other of this wisdom we have within. Enemies, the concept and the experience of it is something which spans the globe, over seas, deserts, frozen lakes, and rainforests, through rivers and mountains, and into the heart of the human soul. There is no place on earth you can run to where you will not encounter the victim-perpetrator dynamic playing out within the social fabric of clan, tribe, community, or society. Nor is there any place you can hide from experiencing love and hate, right, at one point in your lifetime. Even if you were to be living alone in a forest, you would discover that the harshness of nature itself provides similar emotional lessons to those that you would experience when encountering enemy warfare. And that feeling of gentleness from a songbird landing on your hand provides a similar sensation to encountering soul tribe and feeling supported by allies. If you dive deep enough into the Amazon to spend time with isolated tribes untouched by modern day thinking and lifestyles, you'll observe that even they experience, right, good and bad, love and hate, social cohesion, and tribal rivalry, right? Tribal rivalry is a big part of their spiritual practice, right? They're constantly dealing with these different energies, positive and negative. that they work to transmute. As much as the feelings of belonging provide one with a sense of security and pleasure, the feelings of being outcasted provide one with a sense of self-respect and self-sufficiency. Both sides provide something that we can gain greater wisdom from. I recently asked someone who's far away from online communities what their practice is for maintaining personal integrity. And they responded with a simple directive: aim to make the right decisions for the right reasons. Right? That's kind of all we can do. We can aim to make the right decisions for the right reasons. It's simple, yet it's so complex, because sometimes making the right decision for the right reasons separates us from our community. And in that act of integrity, we're placed on the outskirts of a very large, cozy, warm security blanket, because it feels so good to be surrounded by our tribe, our community. But you cannot always please your family, your friends, and social group at large. So the key is to consciously benefit from being on either sides of the coin, if you trust in the process that is life, right? Because life will sometimes place you at the center as the nurturer, for example, and sometimes it will place you on the outskirts, right, as the one to push up against ideas, fixed ideas within any group. So I've had my share of experiences through numerous communities in terms of, having always filled the role of mediator and problem solver, being challenged to master culture over the years has given me the opportunity to see with my own eyes that humans across the board tend to behave in very much the same ways when it comes to mating rituals, which controls a lot of the social dynamics and personal, emotional, and spiritual development. In a multitude of ways, in-grouping proposes care. Envy shows signs of admiration. Hate demonstrates human preservation. Competition ignites transformation. And intolerance calls in healing to collective wounds. Lying demonstrates fear and deception, denial, but they also provide a doorway for truth to eventually emerge through. There are no experiences within the human condition that don't unlock further human growth and personal evolution if we keep our inner compasses aimed towards the philosopher's stone, right? So it's up to us to use everything that comes at us to self-improve and to grow. The key to using enemies to continue growing rests in our attitude and approach towards understanding the human condition itself. This does not mean you should allow others to harm you, serve the wrong people, or uphold poor boundaries. It simply means that striving to see the bigger picture grants you healthy character development and inner strength. To allow our hearts to grow in equal proportion to the darkness, fear, and pain we perceive in the world is to become wise and adaptable in the face of human suffering. Every person has to do this. Taking responsibility for the self is what sets you apart from the underlying fear, which governs all hostility and provides you with the building blocks to personal will. Sorry, I just woke up. Ultimately, self-love and self-care is the remedy for enemy warfare. I'm going to repeat that one. It's so important. Ultimately, self-love and self-care is the remedy for enemy warfare. Strength grows in proportion to how much you can love another unconditionally, simply based on shared humanity, despite their inability to care and love for themselves. Right? So I need to clarify here, unconditional love does not mean putting yourself in danger by placing yourself in the line of fire. right? Or not having healthy boundaries and all the things I mentioned. It's the opposite, right? Unconditional love is saying, I'm going to continue to learn, grow, and transmute the crap out of everything that's coming at me so I can be a living example of what health is, right? Um, so that you're not affected by other people's pain and suffering. You are best to steer clear and move towards what genuinely supports you and engages you in a healthy manner. But when life inevitably brings the harshness of winter to your door, you will be prepared on the inner planes by continuing to cultivate wisdom and accepting these eternal truths, right? We can't eradicate everything in the world that we don't like. We can't change other people's minds. They will change when they want to change, right? It is up to us to continue to challenge ourselves, right, in a healthy way, to know thyself, know thy limits, and definitely to not take things personally. Like, it's a very harsh world if you take things too personally. Um, and I've been there. I've been there before, right? But in order to continue moving forward in this world, you have to have like that private garden, you have to have your private life, that part of yourself that is guarded with the utmost protection. Humans come into their own self-love and empowerment when they are meant to. It is not up to us to save everyone. And first of all, you can't, that whole concept, I'm debunking it. You can't save everyone who shows up wearing the mask of pain, fear, denial, or avoidance. If these states are not alchemized, they cause illness. But when they are seen as teachers, they create health, resilience, and foster personal growth. Enemies that exist as institutions or organizations also provide an equal opportunity to meet yourself on a deeper level and to develop your unique ingenuity in the face of desolation, right? That's ultimately what we're working towards, right? Is being able to co-create together to fight something larger, whatever injustices. I mean, the list goes on, but this video isn't about that right now. This is about, navigating your own ship correctly to increase your own resiliency in the world. The path I've been on has allowed me to see old enemies as reflections of unhealed aspects of self. Most of the time, our enemies themselves are simply echoing protective mechanisms and conditioned behaviors built up during a time in their lives when they themselves were victimized or felt victimized, right? Sometimes it is just the mind's illusion, but sometimes people really are victimized. And this builds up protective mechanisms around people that it's not up to us to go and hack those down. They're there in terms for preservation, and we need to honor that. So there's no forcing. The mind is quite sophisticated when it comes to distributing the weight of traumatic events we all endure at one point or another along the road of life, right? And this is a whole other topic that I could do a whole video on, the sophistication of the mind in terms of psychology, right? And how we create narratives within ourselves and complexes. And we all have to do the work within ourselves to distill, right? To alchemize, go through those stages of seeing what is true soul essence, right? And what has been acquired personality complexes. So your enemies teach you how to develop more courage, how to heal, how to grow and transform, if you have the eyes to see. Your enemies are in their most elementary form, an unhealed child, looking for love disguised as shadow, pain disguised as hostility. Hurt people, right? And it just goes on and on. That in order for people to heal, they need a safe place. So this is where, wisdom really comes in when you're dealing with thy enemy. You have to distinguish what kind of enemy it is. And the enemies that I'm speaking on here are humans that have been hurt, right? I'm not speaking of like larger enemies, okay? Or forces, primal forces within the universe. I'm speaking of, we're all affected by these primal forces, but I'm just speaking of, dealing with genuine human beings that ultimately are all on the same side and that are simply all lost in the confusion of the miasma and the complexities of their own mind, right? And their own complexes. So, enemies themselves are what keep the wheel of social dynamics turning, right? We're dealing with the Tao, we're dealing with yin and yang, right? We're dealing with these opposing forces, the electric and the magnetic, right? This is intrinsic to this realm. So, to find inner peace despite the pushback of enemies is to find yourself in a state of emotional resilience, maturity, and expanded wisdom. When the heart is able to keep expanding despite the painful emotions and actions operating around you, something deeper in you begins to emerge, right? As long as you keep focus on that inner compass, something only the fragility of the human condition itself can lead you towards. Let me just check something. Okay. That deeper place is access to the eternal aspect of yourself, the precious gem that grants you reconnection to soul. It provides the keys that unlock inner freedom and allow you to take back your personal power, your dignity, your sovereignty, your peace by not fighting the enemy without constantly, but rather turning to the true enemies within. Because if everyone is addressing the enemies within, there will be less enemies without. That is also the nature of this reality, as within as without. So again, we are pushed back onto our path to do the internal work. And the enemies hide in many places, but most of all, they first hide within the subconscious mind or the unconscious mind of the conditioned self. Some people inherit enemies from their forefathers. I'm sure many of you can relate to that. Some from their positions in life. Some inherit them through their good actions. Some from their bad actions. Some from their greed, and others from simply extending an olive branch. So you can see how the confusion, right, and just the nature of the complexity of everything is absolutely ridiculous sometimes, right? But that is what we're dealing with. And everybody has their subjective paths and layers, right, of perception, lenses of perception that they're seeing the world through. And sometimes those two don't match. And it really has nothing to do with either one. It's the lens itself that is blurry. So enemies aren't the issue. They are not unnatural to life in this world. We are all exposed to bacteria as soon as we come into this world, and our bodies are eaten by them when we depart. If you know the enemy and you know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles. Sun Tzu, right? That's an important one. I think that's what I'm getting at here. We are here to experience life, and that means embracing the nature of our human condition to overcome it and overcome its hurdles. It's a collective endeavor, one that no human is sheltered from. Right? There's a lot of pain and suffering out there. This is why I put out material on stoicism, and all of these things help the person to confront their fear. It means accepting social transgressions and human growth as the very keys to our collective development. It means having to arise to the initiation of life, to gain the sight of sages, to master wisdom itself. It's a big undertaking. Depersonalize yourself from others' personal development and focus on your own development. Do the inner work to gain emotional balance, grow in self-love so as to become resilient enough to continue being at service to a greater cause when faced with tyranny. Learn to manage your energetic field. Right, this is so key. Don't allow others to enter your temple, your energetic field, without abiding by your temple rules. I'm going to say it again. Don't allow others to enter your temple, your energetic field, without abiding by your temple rules, right? It's like, I'm not going to go out of my way to go into someone else's energetic field. We all have to learn these lessons, but that's actually what creates weakness, right? If you're getting into the esoteric here, but basically, the management of energy is at the very roots of our core strength, resilience, and longevity. When an honest resolution to conflict is denied, simply let go. It sounds easier said than done, but that's your task, right? The desire to control others' process and force resolution is at the core of long-during conflicts and energy loss. Long-running conflicts are at the core of a weakened bioenergetic field and loss of resources that were otherwise meant to be put to great use, right? So the whole, like, once you understand the whole thing, you have to reorient back into yourself, right? The more you battle the enemy, the more energy you lose, right? And the more you create weaknesses within your protective barriers. So the whole thing is a loss of energy, but it's also a necessary part of human development, right? To get everyone on an individual level, on a collective level, to see our own stupidity and to see our own like unconscious material. So we're not here to heal the world. We're here to heal ourselves and refine and develop our gifts to be living expressions of what health looks like as it moves through life creating, right? That is the healing. The directly trying to heal others is a mute point, because you can only heal yourself. It took me a long time to understand that, but you can only heal yourself. So the only healing we can offer others is through healing ourselves, ultimately. The rest is just, it's kind of fool's play. It's enmeshment to get us there eventually. But turning towards the self is ultimately how we help heal others and issues that we see, these larger issues that we're trying to tackle globally. The goal is for each of us to be firmly rooted in our core so as to reciprocate soul essence, right, with each other as we build the world anew. We don't have to explain to anyone who we are. Any given person will always be obscured. So trying to explain who you are to someone is impossible, because the person observing you, right, will see you obscured by their subjective lenses. So we can never see anyone clearly. We're always seeing them from our unique perspective. So once you realize that, you can give everybody a little bit more breathing room, because people are not exactly who we see them to be. There's so much more, right? We are universes within ourselves. We can attempt at making intelligent and conscious decisions based on accumulated knowledge and past experiences, but we can't control a force of intelligence larger than our current capacity. There are many things out of humans' control, despite our desire to harness them all. Personal will only directs so much. The greater forces governing this world are those which we call fate, right? And I could do a whole episode on just this, but the quote from Carl Jung really sums it up. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. And I do believe that a huge portion of what we call fate is the unconscious, our unconscious selves driving us in specific directions so that we can have specific lessons, right? We don't understand why we're attracted to certain things or why we make certain decisions. And then we're like, oh my gosh, that must have been fated. Well, no, there was a part of us that knew exactly what we were doing, right? And or the shadow pushing us towards something because we're so unconscious about something that it wants to smack you awake, right? Through shock. That happens too a lot, and that's really unpleasant, but that is the process of, breaking through that cognitive dissonance and working through the shadow material. Okay, I'm going to conclude this. So to conclude, enemies are experienced in this realm to assist us in returning to self and remembering who we are at our very core. Without them, we would not encounter our shadows, nor would we be given the opportunities to overcome what hinders us from growth, from personal growth. Evolution is often found through chipping away at the concrete walls built around us, especially the ones laid there to defend our human condition, right? Not the ones laid there to defend our souls. We have to make a distinction between those two different types of walls because personality complexes are protective mechanisms themselves. We must never forget the ego is a wonderful servant, but a horrible master. And to do the shadow work means to properly separate the parts of self during the dissolution process of development, right? To fully let them rot, right? All the parts that were just acquired, complexes, acquired personality, so we can see clearly what ought to be nurtured into fullness. That's the key to healthy development, right? And to incorrectly complete that step is to become subsumed by the enemy within and without. To do it correctly is to use the enemy as both a gift and a doorway into soul rebirth and revolution. So, the enemy helps us move through that alchemical process, right? It's often the enemy that pushes people into the blackening, into the negredo, right? Through shock, through deception, through betrayal, right? But where does that lead us? It leads us to soul, right? So we have all these experiences and we just have to continue to harness them properly so that we can get into those deeper layers and really allow the burning away of everything that is conditioned, right? All the childhood programming and right. I can go into a whole other hour of just discussing that, but I'm going to leave it there. I really wanted to bring this forward, and I feel like this is that next step for the collective. Really just get a grasp on, especially regarding the different types of discourse, meta conversations, which is the larger the conversation about the conversation, the authentic content, and just, questioning what it is you're watching, right? You also have conversations that are being had that are inside conversations, right? Using metaphor and all sorts of different strategies, right? In larger conversations between 2 or 3 people, right? This is where all the conflicts are happening. Um, Not everyone is direct about it. A lot of people are just using word magic, you know. But if you know what arguments are happening with all these within all these different groups, then you can clearly see that. But it's really a waste of time. And it's so childish, in my opinion. It's like kindergarten. But that's just me, and it's because I've seen it for years, you know, and I took it really seriously. And I used to be really bothered by it. But I think the approach with humor, to approach it with humor, is really what allows us to move beyond it, right? There is something there about when we take ourselves too seriously, we get stuck, right? So we have to be able to laugh at ourselves and move beyond the enemy, move beyond the enemy itself, and move back into something greater, right? That we want to bring forward. So, again, thank you for listening. And I really hope everyone has a great end of June. Um, I'm sure I'll be back soon. And I look forward to seeing where everything leads. I think it's going to be really intense up until August. If you want to get a hold of me, you can do so at inspiringplayfulevolutions.com. Check out my service offerings there. And I look forward to speaking with some of you. All right, take care.